Welcome back to Racing Rundown. On this video, we're going to be discussing the Grade 1 Arkansas Derby from Oaklawn Park this upcoming weekend. We're going to be returning to the traditional format, the way that we do race previews normally here. The last race preview that I did, the Dubai World Cup preview, was a little bit different because we were trying to beat a heavy favorite here in that race, and I had to go really super in depth and pull a lot of data as to why you had to beat Life is Good there. Fortunately, I was very happy with how that preview came out, obviously because we had the winner, but the race played out pretty much exactly how I drew it up, which doesn't always happen, but when it does, it certainly was it certainly is very gratifying. So very happy with how that preview came out. A couple other housekeeping things before we get to this preview. If you haven't subscribed to Racing Rundown already, be sure to subscribe down below. And also, if you don't follow us on our various on our podcast, Racing Rundown podcast, you can follow one of the links down below to our various podcast platforms. We're on everywhere where you get your podcasts at. You can listen to Racing Rundown there. There will also be timestamps in this video for every horse. So if you're only playing a couple horses in here and you just want to get my thoughts on those horses, you can click on those down below as well. But the first horse that we're going to get to is Kavad, the fourth place finisher in the last three races on the Kentucky Derby Trail at Oaklawn. And actually, he won the Advent Stakes, which was a new stake that Oaklawn Park created for their December meet for 2-year-olds. He won that race. And this is a guy who is very, very experienced. He's ran in 12 races, only run 3 of them, but he has been in nearly constant, really tough company for the entirety of his career, basically going back ever since he broke his maiden. Some of them have been good, some of them have not been good. But, really looking at this horse, I think the difficulty with him is finding how he's going to be able to win this race. I'm showing you some of the race charts right now. He's an honest horse, but there's a couple problems with him. You don't pick up enough Derby points by consistently running fourth in races. And the other thing is you don't get paid if your horse runs fourth in races. So Kavad is a horse that I've thought has run some really, really nice races as of late, but unfortunately you can't bet Kavad outside of anything like a super or anything like that. I think he'll be a price in this race, but I don't see a reason how he's going to step forward if he hasn't been able to run better than fourth in the Southwest or the Rebel. I don't really see how that's going to change here. So Kavad is a horse that I would include in exotic wagers. If you're playing a super, I would include Kavad, but that's really about it for him. I think that there are better horses in here at value and better horses even if you're not trying to get value in here. So that's about it. I have to say, he's a good horse. He runs his race every time, but unfortunately his race isn't good enough to really accomplish much of anything for him outside of picking up a pretty decent check for his owners. Now we're going to move on and talk about the number 2 horse in this race, Chasing Time, for trainer Steve Asmussen. This is a horse who's coming out of a 5th place finish in the Rebel Stakes. And I'll get into this horse right now because this is a horse that I've never really been that big of a fan of. Taking a look at the chart here, he won an allowance race, which obviously wasn't the first victory of his career, but he won an allowance race very impressively on the 14th of January. And of course, because it was January and at that time of year, we're always searching for who the Derby leaders are. This was a horse that immediately caught a lot of people's eyes. I was never really a big fan of him. Eric was never really a big fan of him. And he was a fave for both of us come time for the Rebel Stakes. And he ran pretty much as we expected that he was going to. Didn't really run that well in there, was only a nose in front of Newgrange, who really only outdid him, barely outdid him for least performing horse in terms of weighing the performance in terms of how they were actually expected to perform there. But both of those horses extremely disappointing in the Rebel Stakes, and really Chasing Time is a horse that I'm going to view as a big fade here. I don't think he'll be as short of a price as he was in the Rebel Stakes, but I could imagine seeing him still take some kind of money here. He's going to be a massive pass for me just because didn't like the allowance victory. I thought it was a bit of a fool's gold victory, and certainly don't like the effort that he turned into the Rebel Stakes. So he's going to be a fade for me. Now we're going to move on and talk about the number 3 horse, Barber Road, in this race. And Barber Road is a horse that I really, really like coming into the Arkansas Derby. I think Barber Road is going to be one of the biggest value play horses in this race. And the thing about Barber Road that's really nice is he runs his race every time. He's had 7 career starts. He's only missed the board once, and that was in his first career start. And he has been running in some, I'm not going to call them really strong stakes races, but he's been in stakes company the last 4 races of his career. We'll take a look at the first one, which was at Churchill Downs on the Stars of Tomorrow card there, where he was only a half link behind Tejano Twist, who is a pretty decent horse in his own right. We'll move on to the next race, which was the Southwest Stakes. He ran second there behind Dash Attack at almost 9-1 in there, 8.5-1 in that race. Moving on to the third race, the Southwest Stakes, a race I unfortunately had him in this race, even though he ran really well for me here. He got beat by Newgrange, but you look at that price there, almost 12-1 in here. Last race in the Rebel Stakes, once again, at a pretty decent price, lower than you got him in all those other races, but he ran his race once again. He was a nose away from being second, beaten only a half length by Un Ojo. I never got around to doing this, but after the 50-point preps concluded, I was eyeing the possibility of making a video talking about 3 horses that hadn't already clinched a spot in the Kentucky Derby that I thought would make the Derby. And Barber Road was going to be one of those horses because he just consistently runs well and is the type of horse that can pick up points. He's sitting at 18 points right now. He's going to need to run good in this race to get to the Kentucky Derby. But I think a second could potentially put him in there. But the unfortunate thing about him is that he seems to be the type that doesn't want to win races. He'll run huge, but he won't win. So I don't think he's a win play, but I think he'll be closer to where he was in the Southwest, around that 10-12-1 range than he was in the Rebel, because he didn't run bad in the Rebel, but there's a couple horses in here who are going to take a lot of money, and I don't think Barber Road is going to be one of those horses that takes a ton of money. So Barber Road is absolutely my value play in this race. Got to use him somewhere underneath. I think he'll run another big race here and potentially make the Kentucky Derby. Now we're going to move on and talk about the number 4 horse in this race, Doppelganger. First start in the barn of new trainer Tim Yakteen. We have a video that's going to be, it may be out already. If it isn't out already, it'll be out in the next couple of days, discussing the transfer of Bob Baffert horses to the barn of former assistant Tim Yakteen. Doppelganger is the first one to be entered. There could be potentially one more horse running in one of the 100-point prep races this weekend, running that was formerly trained by Baffert, but obviously, you know the situation that has happened with Bob Baffert and Churchill Downs. Horses can't earn Derby points, and as Baffert's suspension is effective April 4th, he has to basically dismantle his racing operation for 3 months. Doppelganger was identified by the ownership group as a horse who could potentially make the Kentucky Derby, so they're going to give him his shot to pick up Derby points. He's got to run first or second here, though, because he needs those points. He was second to San Felipe last out, normally would give him 20 points, but as Baffert is banned from Churchill Downs and banned from horses under his name are banned from earning points toward the race, he doesn't have any points. Looking at Doppelganger, this is a horse who broke his maiden very nicely at Los Alamitos on, I believe, the same card as the Los Alamitos Futurity. And I know a lot of people really liked him after this maiden victory. He was odds on in the San Vicente, and he was beaten by not just Forbidden Kingdom and Pinehurst, but also McLaren Vale. That was a race where I really got off Doppelganger. I was on him. I thought he was going to win this race easily. And when he didn't, I immediately dropped him out of this race. He ran okay in the San Felipe, but really, you look at the horses that were finishing underneath of him, none of those horses are really in any universe consider top level graded stakes horse, much less Kentucky Derby trail horses. So and he was beaten by Forbidden Kingdom and really never showed any chance to run better than second there. So Doppelganger is a horse I'm going to fade. I'm not sure how much money he's going to take because he is from that ownership group. He is formerly trained by Baffert. Those horses tend to take their money in these points races. But the public could be dissuaded by the last couple of efforts from Doppelganger, like I am. He's a fade here, not as big of a fade as Chasing Time, but right up there with Chasing Time in my fades of this weekend. Now we're going to move on to the number 5 horse in this race, Un Ojo. This is a horse who's extremely interesting coming into this race. Before his win in the in the Rebel and his runner-up in the Withers, this was a horse who had been running in a couple of New York bred stakes. A New York bred stakes up at Aqueduct and a listed stakes down at Delta Downs. But really odd progression for this guy. He ran second by a neck in a New York bred stake back in 2021 for 2-year-olds, and then comes out of nowhere basically and runs second behind early voting in the Withers. And if you remember the story of that race, looked really good visually from early voting there. But then most of the figures came back really slow for that race. And so everybody kind of disregarded early voting and, the general wisdom. And I was among this camp. The general wisdom was, well, early voting isn't that good and everybody else underneath him stinks. Well, 3 weeks later, Unoho comes out at 75-1 and pulls off a huge upset in the Rebel, closing and getting up to win the race by about a half a length over Ethereal Road and Barber Road in there. So a really, really big run from him in the Rebel. And I think from this point, it's very difficult to read what Unoho is going to do in this race and how the public's going to view this horse, because he was a huge price in the Rebel. He was a huge price in the, less of a huge price in the Withers, but still big price in the Withers. But, I'm not crazy about really anything that he's done. I think that, the group that he beat in the Rebel was rather weak. I know I said I like Barber Road, but Barber Road doesn't ever win races. I like Ethereal Road, but I thought Ethereal Road was the best horse in the race, or, could have won a winning race. I wasn't a fan with how he was ridden in there. And then, his New York bred race was, it was a stake against New York bred. So Unoho is a horse that I'm very, very perplexed on. He could run huge here. He could also run not so good here. He could take some money, be a wise guy horse in here. He could also be double digits in this race. I have no idea where they're going to go, where the public's going to go with this horse. And most importantly, I don't know how he's going to run in here. And usually the way I like to do with horses that I don't know what's going to come from them is I usually tend to fade them. So I'm going to fade Unoho in this spot. And now we're going to move on and talk about the likely favorite in this race, and definitely the sentimental favorite in here for sure, and that is the filly Secret Oath for the coach, D. Wayne Lukas. The first time in the history of Racing Rundown that I'm talking about a D. Wayne Lukas horse that actually has a chance on the Kentucky Derby Trail. Usually he's got a couple horses every year because he's Wayne Lukas, but this is the first one in the time that we've been doing Racing Rundown that actually has a chance. And boy, Secret Oath is a really, really good filly. The last 3 races have just been brilliant performance after brilliant performance. Her effort in the Goldenrod is very, very perplexing, but 4 of her last 5 races have just been so good that I'm just gonna, completely draw a line through. The phrase that I always use is "like the chart on fire." Basically, like the chart on fire for the Goldenrod. She is much better than that. Can't really explain what happened there, but you look at the form of her last 3 races. I'm showing you the chart of her maiden race right now. She broke her maiden by 5 1/4 lengths at Churchill Downs, but since that Goldenrod, nothing but brilliant. 8-length victory in New Year's Eve allowance race at Oaklawn over a pretty decent filly by the name of Matarea for Brad Cox. So, it's not like she has been beating terrible horses. I will say she hasn't been beating anybody, but it doesn't matter because she's been winning these races by so much. So, yeah, has she beaten anything? No, she hasn't, but it doesn't matter because she's just been so good in the process of doing that. She deserves to be the favorite here, and I think she's got a huge shot to win this race. I'm going to be on her for several reasons. The first one is, I think she has the most talent in the race, obviously, but I also think the race is going to set up really well for her. She doesn't need to be front running in here, although the connections, and specifically Gary Stevens isn't part of the connections, but Gary Stevens has kind of made some comments that he thinks that she might be able to go towards on the front end, but she doesn't have to in here. There's several horses in here that are going to be forwardly placed. Kavad, Chasing Time could potentially be there. We'll get to We the People a little bit later, but she's going to be able to sit her usual stalking trip here. And the big thing with her is as long as she doesn't find trouble, she should be able to win this race rather easily. I am a little bit concerned about her finding trouble because she did kind of look like she was going to find trouble in the Honeybee, but she was so much the best in that race. It really didn't matter. Wayne Lukas is no stranger to doing this in the Arkansas Derby. He is actually, to my knowledge, the only trainer that has won the Arkansas Derby with a filly. That was back with Althea in 1984, and Althea was actually part of the favored entry of Lucas fillies there with eventual Breeders' Cup winner Life's Magic, for you historians out there who know the history of this race. And so not unprecedented for Wayne Lukas, and obviously everybody knows he's won this race with Winning Colors. I've seen plenty of people talking about this filly and comparing her to Winning Colors. I'm not sure that I'm quite there yet with her, but she is as good as they come in terms of 3-year-old fillies in the United States this year. And there's some good 3-year-old fillies on the Oaks Trail. She's now on the Derby Trail, but as you can probably imagine, she is the goods. I expect her to win this race, and I think that I want her to win this race. I want to see a filly in the Kentucky or in the Kentucky Derby, excuse me, and I think that she will, because race plays really well into her, and she's just that good of a horse. Hopefully, we'll get to see a filly in the Kentucky Derby this year, and I think that Secret Oath is going to be that one. Now we're going to move on to a horse that I'm going to try to be pretty quick with, and that is Ben Diesel. This is a horse that I've gone back and forth on. I thought after the Kentucky Jockey Club that this was a horse who could potentially be one of those one of those horses that just runs and continues to pick up points, like a Barber Road type. But unfortunately, he hasn't really done that as of late. He is kind of on the every other race streak. He was good in the Kentucky Jockey Club, bad in the Smarty Jones, good in the Southwest, bad in the Rebel. But I don't really know that he's going to change that here. Dallas Stewart sometimes is able to pull horses like this at huge odds in these races, and if you're willing to take your chances with him at a huge price here, being one of those Dallas Stewart horses to pull something like that, then go for it, but he's not for me here. Now we're going to move on and talk about number 8, Cyberknife, in this race, colt for Brad Cox. This is a horse who is rather interesting to me. I liked his last effort a lot, and I liked his maiden breaking effort at the fairgrounds on the 26th of December of last year, which was on the same card as the Gunrunner Stakes. This is a horse who's technically won 3 races in his life, but he was disqualified in his first career start. Probably was a good disqualification there. He earned it, but he was in front there, so that is worth mentioning. The thing that's really making me iffy about him is his one run in stakes company, which was the LeComp Stakes. I'm tending to lean towards the Like That Race on Fire type of viewpoint, because Epicenter didn't win there, and Epicenter has come back and been brilliant in his last 2 starts. So I think that race is just ultimately going to amount to just being weird for everybody. I'll take my, Cyberknife may or may not be a horse that I think is worth playing here. It depends on how much money he ends up taking. There are a couple other horses I like in here in terms of value underneath than Cyberknife. So he's not for me, but I can absolutely see why folks would like him here. And at the right price, Cyberknife could be a really, really good horse at value in here. He's definitely not going to be the favorite. He probably won't be the second choice, and may not even be the third choice. Could end up being the third choice, but who knows? I think he if you like him, he's worth a play here. I don't dislike him, but there are horses I like more than him, so I'm going to take a pass on him in this race. But I should mention his victory last out at the fairgrounds was really good on Risen Star Day, 3-length victory. So if you liked that effort, could take a chance with him here. He could hit the board here and earn himself some Derby points. Now we're going to move on to the final horse that we're going to discuss in this race, and that is We the People. Excuse me for the little chart mix up there. We the People has won both of his races at Oaklawn very impressively. He won his maiden race and the allowance race last out, both by some pretty big margins in there. He won by 5 3/4 lengths when he broke his maiden on February 12th, and he won by 5 lengths when he won his second start on March 12th. Both of those wins have been very nice. Eric really likes this horse. I believe Eric is going to pick this horse. Last time we talked, that's what he said he was going to do. I'm not sure if that is still the case, but I know Eric really likes him. I'm not sure how to view him. He's going to be a horse that I think will be, he'll be forwardly placed up there. So I think there's going to be some speed presence. I don't think they're going to go super fast here. And We the People could be really good. I'm not going to pick him here, but I am going to use him underneath here. But who knows? He could get first run on Secret Oath. Secret Oath could find some trouble, and We the People could find himself in the Kentucky Derby starting gate. I think he's a good horse going forward, but I question whether or not this is too much too soon for him. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. He could make the Derby starting gate. Like I said, I'm going to use him, but I'm not going to use him on top. He'll probably be a shorter price in here because folks are going to play him a lot, I think, because the last 2 victories have been really nice, but I think he's worth using in here. My trifecta in this race is not going to be very exotic here. Secret Oath on top of We the People, but the horse I'm going to stick in for third is Barber Road. So Barber Road, my projection does get his spot in the Kentucky Derby. So does Secret Oath, and so does We the People. So 3 horses, in my opinion, coming out of this race for the Kentucky Derby. We'll see you next time on Racing Rundown. Eric, later on in the week, is going to have a preview of the Florida Derby. So be sure to check that out, and also be sure to check out episode number 150. 7 of Racing Rundown coming up this week, where we will be recapping everything from the Dubai World Cup and also previewing